Welcome to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy with Brent Lee and Neil Sanders. This is the Manchester Arena bombing on trial series. On the 22nd of May, 2017, Salman Abedi detonated a bomb in the foyer of the Manchester Arena at the end of an Ariana Grande concert, killing 22 people and injuring hundreds more. A conspiracy theory claiming that this bombing was hoaxed and everyone involved was a crisis actor soon became a dominant narrative in the conspirasphere. One of the main proponents of this theory is Richard D. Hall. Over the course of this series, we will be examining the claims made by Richard D. Hall, as told in his book and documentary, Night of the Bag. Please be aware, this series will be examining a deadly bombing, and we will be discussing details of death and injury. Listener discretion is advised. This is part 6.
Now, as Richard goes on, he mentions Salman Abedi. Now, and here's a strange thing, right? Because he says another aspect that points to foreknowledge and proves the official narrative is impossible is the choice of the supposed perpetrator. And he suggests that Salman Abedi's father was an MI6 asset. Now, here's a silly thing. This is accurate. Some of this is accurate, okay? For example, Salman Abedi had been trained in Libya at the age of 16. He'd gone over there with his father. He's got a friend called Abdel Rauf Abdallah, who claims to have been trained by NATO. He's a convicted terrorist. And Libyans from Manchester were part of a campaign to fight Gaddafi in 2011. And Salman, he may have fought with the Martyrs Brigade in 2011 or attended a training camp. His older brother Ismail and his father Ramadan are also connected to the Martyrs Brigade. And an email leaked from Stratfor, which is a security services thing in America, says that NATO basically served as de facto aerial air force during the Martyrs Brigade push into Tripoli. Now, there's more. There's even more to that we'll come into later. But that's a real conspiracy. Richard's missed that by a country fucking mile. Yeah. And furthermore, it doesn't actually, he's not explained why it would show that the official narrative is impossible. It doesn't make the official narrative impossible. It just adds some extra context to it. Now, when he goes about, if you remember, we were saying that basically there were several witnesses that said they saw him dump the bag and then try and run away.
That's interesting. That is very interesting.
That might well be the case.
Okay.
Because two things. One, afterwards it was discovered that the bomb could have been set off by a mobile phone remotely. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it was set off remotely. That could have been the mechanism that he was supposed to use, type it into a phone or whatever. But it did have the capability. And also, his torso was found outside. So it's entirely possible that he dropped the bag to try and run away. Boom.
And the propulsion. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But Richard takes it a step further and basically says that there's this grey Audi that was seen beforehand and then monitored by the police, and then somehow somebody got into it and they were picked up by armed police at about midnight. Again, this is absolutely true. There was an Audi going around. It was parked up. An Asian guy did get out of it and it was picked up at about midnight. But there's several things that make it sort of slightly difficult to assume that it was Salman Abedi. We went to the DVLA and found out about this car.
Wow.
This car failed its MOT in July 2023. It was in an accident in 2018, but it was MOT'd in late 2017, 2018 and 2019. And then it was off-road and then it failed its MOT in 2023. Now, if you're going to use a car in a terror plot like this, why would you still keep this car on the road and keep going and MOTing it year and year and year afterwards? This suggests that was just some poor Asian guy, probably a takeaway delivery guy that was running around with a backpack that happened to match the description. You know what else points to the fact that basically this wasn't an escape car? The car just kept driving round and round in circles around Manchester. It was stopped about as far away from the Manchester Arena when it was stopped by armed police as it was parked originally. Almost as if it's just some Asian guy maybe driving around delivering food. But yeah, we found that car. We actually went to the DVLA and got the details of it. And it doesn't tell you who the owner is because that's GDPR. But it's had the same owner since February 2015, and it was on the road until 2019. Right? Okay. If you've got a car that's involved as a crucial part of a terror plot that you're trying to hide from the public, you don't do that.
Why is it still driving around?
Yeah, precisely. So to our mind,
mental.
It's probably not actually that strong a piece of evidence.
Probably not. I was giving you guys a benefit of the doubt though earlier because there were some pretty good things in it.
Yeah, totally.
And fair call to debunk it, but like this guy who did the book did his research, did his homework.
Yeah, absolutely.
But did it through a lens.
Yeah, this is the point. But it's based on two strong bits of evidence. But we'll come to those in a second. Now, when Richard starts saying that TATP shouldn't have produced a heat signature and it shouldn't produce a flash, and we know it did because there's loads of people described seeing it. In fact, the flash has actually been caught on camera, and the heat signature was felt by lots of people as well. Does this indicate that TATP was not used as the bomb? Potentially, yeah, but also potentially not, because here's the problem, right? Okay, even if you go onto Wikipedia, it says that although most people think it's an explosion without flame and fire, it does actually, in some experiments, show a heat signature, if only a very brief one. Well, certainly one that you would feel. So that in itself is debated. But there's a further complication to this, in as much as we don't know what he mixed it with. He might not have made it particularly well.
Okay.
And by adding contaminants, we spoke to an explosive expert that we found on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
Says, is there any scenario where TATP could produce a heat signature? He says, surprisingly easily. Like you have to mix it wrong or you add something into it. So there's several possibilities. It might not have been TATP. It might have been some other type of explosion.
But if you're not a good chemist, then yes, it might happen.
Yeah. Well, that's the other point as well.
Yeah, we spoke to Dan Cassetta, who is a national security and CBRN expert. And he approached us basically and said, I've written several relevant books and I was a disaster preparedness advisor at the White House for 6 years. I also know a rather lot about explosives.
So yeah, and he confirmed that it can happen. So that's a bit of an unknown still. Are they lying about what explosive was used? Possibly. Was it TATP and it just did cause a blast because of the way it was mixed? Possibly. Was it TATP but it was heavily contaminated so it caused a blast? Possibly. So we just don't know. But it doesn't defeat the entire narrative by any stretch of the imagination. And just to go back to our previous point, which was sort of skated over, Richard suggests that Salman Abedi was for weeks filming himself he arrived in the car, which we have shown is probably not the case. But so all the footage of him arriving on the tram and stuff like that, he says must have been filmed weeks and weeks before. Now, the CCTV shows that he did arrive on the tram. We can see him there. So he didn't arrive in the car. But furthermore, he couldn't have filmed it earlier because up until 4 days earlier, he was in Libya.
Really?
Yes, he was in Libya. This is something, again, I hate to not spoilers, but there were several reasons why this probably should not have been able to happen. And one of those was that only 4 days prior to this, Salman Abedi came back from Libya and then went straight to Belmarsh prison to meet his terrorist friend, Abdel Rauf Abdullah, without being stopped or questioned by MI5, despite the fact that he was known to be part of Libyan freedom fighters, which were later reclassified as a terrorist organization.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is the thing. There is stuff to be dug in this. It's not as straightforward and black and white, but I don't think Richard is correct, unfortunately. So, the roadie, where basically he says that the armed police were there before the time. This is a strange one. Okay, you don't know. Maybe the police were there before they arrived, and so there's a discrepancy in the report. Maybe he's misjudged the time. Either way, if I'm brutally honest, I don't really think it's that important, to be quite honest. We're talking about a discrepancy of about 6 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
And
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And regardless, it's like you were just saying, when you're in these stress scenarios, all of a sudden the time can dilate, go really like whatever. And so I wouldn't really put that down. Now, here we go. This is the big one. The EXIF data.
Yes.
Now, the EXIF data is the metadata that shows where the photo was taken, what time it was taken. And this was something we were really, really struggling with. So let me just show you. So we can actually show you on the page if you can see that.
Whoa.
That's the EXIF data. So it says there, that's the picture that it's from, and that's the actual data. And it says, source, PA, date created, 2017, 22nd of the 5th, time created, 7/11/18, credit, AP, country primary, GBR.
GBR, Great Britain.
Yeah. This took us ages to figure out because we went down the same route as you. We were like, well, could it be that the camera phone internal time clock was not accurate? It could be, but that's not very likely. So we went down the other route. It was like, is this a time zone sort of thing? And it's like, even if it is a time zone, it's 15 hours. So why do we get that discrepancy? We just couldn't figure it out. And then Brent figured it out. Because Brent looked at it and went, hang on, this isn't the EXIF data for the photo.
Here's the Satan clock that I figured out through my my previous understanding. Sorry, I'm being terrible. That was very mean. I shouldn't say that. I'm just kidding. I love you.
He said, hang on, look at who's the owner of this. Who's the owner of this EXIF data, this supposed EXIF data? And we looked at it. It says AP, Associated Press.
Okay.
We're like, hang on. It wasn't Associated Press that took the photo. It was the homeless fellow. So why are they listed as the thing? And we did a bit of digging and we figured it out. It isn't EXIF data. It's what's called IPTC data, International Press Transfer Credits. Right, okay? Now, this isn't the time when the picture was taken. This is the time when the picture was copyrighted by Associated Press.
Yep. Amazing.
Now, EXIF data uses 24-hour clock.
Yep.
IPTC data uses 12-hour clock. So when it's 7/11, that's not 7:11 a.m. in the morning. That's 7:11 p.m. in New York City, where the Associated Press office is.
In New York City, motherfucker.
Right?
That is so complex. Brent, you are autistic. I'm sorry. I don't want to diagnose you over a podcast, but you are. That's why you got to now fly Qantas the whole time and you're Dustin Hoffman.
It's better than that because there's still an hour that's wrong.
The fuck off, really?
Yeah. There's still an hour that's wrong. Okay, why is there an hour that's wrong? And it's to do with daylight savings time because daylight savings time started on the 14th in America and on the 26th in the UK.
Fantastic.
So at 11:11, 40 minutes after the bomb went off, it was 7:11 in New York.
Fuck me.
And the data is the IPTC data where in New York, Associated Press copyrighted it at 11:11 UK time.
Okay. Yep. All right. So Brent's Dustin Hoffman. Yeah. Flies Qantas. Yep. That is incredible. I'm not saying any shit on neurodivergent people who are listening. I love you all. My partner, Maverick, what are your ranks? And all I have to say is your attention to detail will never stop making me happy.
It just hit me one day. We were talking about it, weren't we? And I was at work and I was like mulling over the ideas and I was like I was running the picture like through like software to see if it had been photoshopped at all, if there had been layers put into it and all this kind of stuff on my phone while I'm at work, you know, and I'm going over it and thinking. And then all of a sudden just like light bulb moment. I ran outside and phoned you and I was dude, FaceTimed him. I'm like, dude, I got it. You got to look into this. Here, check this out.
So absurd and just so ridiculous. And this must be how, like, when those kids connect the dots, but imaginary dots on conspiracy theories. Because we used to have this sort of thing back in the day where we were like, oh, yeah, man, like this, that, the other thing. But it was so tenuous and so dumb. But that's actually clever and actually good. So, yeah.
We were very, very pleased with that. We spent a good long time punching the air. And it was a brilliant sort of combined effort as well. So, but yeah, so just in case anybody's missed that, basically, it wasn't filmed at 7:11 a.m. in the morning of the 22nd. It was copyrighted at 7:11 in the evening in New York. Yeah, so that's why, because they only use 12-hour clock. And then the later ones where, hang on, this has been uploaded at 3 in the morning and this has been uploaded at 4 in the morning. That isn't the same picture. It's different versions of the same picture and when they've been sent to other time zones and copyrighted there. So there's a full explanation. Now, again, I want to be kind to Richard here, because if I had not understood that, it took us ages. For weeks and weeks and weeks, we were like, it looks like it was taken in the morning and we cannot figure out an explanation for it. And then we did figure out the explanation for it, which is totally plausible. And we've checked it and that's exactly what it is. But if you thought that, you could understand why that was a strong piece of evidence. The problem is that that's the foundation of his entire theory. And once that goes, you're left with nothing.
That's the foundation of at least him saying that there's two scenarios.
Yeah.
Like there's one being filmed in the morning and there's one that happens to play out in the evening. So it totally destroys the being performed in the morning part.
And what about the light coming in? You can remember there was a bit of light that was supposedly coming in through the thing. Yeah. Well, if you look at that photo, it's not light coming in through the door. On the opposite side, there's a ticket booth, and above it, it's got a great big white banner that's lit up with lights behind it. It's the reflection of that hitting the door.
Okay.
I mean, Richard even debunks it himself because he says, look at Google Maps. They've bothered to put a tarpaulin over the top of the skylight, remember? And so sorry, are you explaining to me that they went to all the trouble of climbing on the roof of the arena, putting a tarpaulin over it so that you couldn't see inside, but they forgot to close the fucking curtains on the front door?
Yeah.
Are you mad?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And here's another thing, right? Okay. Richard says that the suite, the room where it happened, the foyer, the city suite, he says that this is the perfect place to film this because it's an enclosed space. And he's wrong. He's wrong on two counts. One, it's what's called a grey area, which means that it is always open to the public and it is not owned by any of the businesses that operate there. There's several. There's a McDonald's, there's a shop on the top, and then there's the arena. Nobody owns it. And it's open to the general public all the time.
Interesting.
Furthermore, it's next to one of the busiest train stations in the country. Literally next to it, like 20 meters. Are you telling me that on rush hour in the morning, you were filming a fake bombing going off in an area that is open to the public? It's just not going to happen. Everybody would hear it.
There would have been thousands, right? Thousands that would have been able to say something about that.
Yeah, exactly. This is the point. Unfortunately, it's already falling to pieces because it looks like, although he thought it wasn't filmed in the morning for three very good reasons. Right, okay, the evidence just doesn't stack up. It just wasn't filmed in the morning. That photo was taken in the evening, and there's no evidence that shows anything otherwise. So he's completely done his theory already. But let's go on. So basically, when they're saying stuff like there's a discrepancy in the number of people there and stuff like that, Mike Smith turned up and said that he thought there was about 30 or 40. Lee Vaughan was a paramedic. He said there was about 30. They basically had a limited view on arrival. What they're saying, again, that's taken slightly out of context. He's saying, when I arrived, I scanned around and thought it was this. You've got to remember, and I don't wish to be crude, but some of those people were in bits.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like literally in bits.
That's why tonight's been hard. You know, if everyone's an empath here, they can feel that. It sucks. It's hard.
This is the thing. Now, the other point is that basically Nick Bickerstaff, who said this 60 to 80, he's not trained in that. He's in a high stress situation. He's worried that he's going to die and his daughter's dead. And Lee Vaughan, the paramedic that went in there and said, "Oh, I'm dealing with 26 patients at a time." That's not all of them. There were 3 paramedics in there. Now, again, here's the thing: the fact that 3 paramedics got in there, you know why they went in there? They disobeyed orders. They were told to stay back. And this is the thing that Richard points out, that they said that police and firemen and paramedics were told to stay out of the area.
Because of potential secondary blasts.
That's the thing. It's a thing called Operation Plato, which was enacted, which basically means that basically you don't go to an area because they thought there might be an active shooter or a secondary device or whatever. 3 paramedics disobeyed orders and went in.
Do they have like Victoria Crosses or some shit?
Well, they certainly have been sort of honoured in the inquiry. I'm not sure, to be quite honest. But again, the fact and there's several members of the public that also T-shirt sellers and stuff like that ran in to help. You've got two choices. Either they're all in on it, or it can't possibly be fake. Otherwise, they would notice it. Right? Okay. And here's the thing. If some people can run in, and we've already established that it's not filmed at 7 a.m, then anyone could run in. And we've also established that the doors were open, so the general public could come in. So this idea of it being an area that it could be contained in, it just doesn't hold water. Then he goes on to he starts to talk about these people aren't really dead and stuff like that. I said this on the Disaster Trolls thing. How on earth are you going to recruit this? Either you're going to get general members of the public who basically in a very, very short time have got to decide to alter their entire life and start anew. Or otherwise you're going to get jobbing actors. And wouldn't people notice that, hang on, they were in Pirates of Penzance last week and now there's someone else? And furthermore, what actor doesn't want credit for the part of their career as well? I thought about it this way, right? Okay. My friend Chris, who's always bloody round here, right? Okay. Imagine if he was involved in this and he died in the Manchester bombing, but actually he's fucked off to America and he's now a lawyer or whatever. Every birthday and Christmas, I'm going to go up to Chris's parents' house and say, oh, I miss Chris because we've been friends for 30 years, right? And they, who've known me since I was a child, are going to lie to my face, are they? And also when Chris is off doing well, right, they can't tell me, oh, Chris is doing very well. And what happens if Chris's parents get ill? He can't come back and see them. That's it. You've cut off ties forever.
I'm sorry to tell you, Chris didn't actually like you.
Well,
that's why it's worked. That's why it's worked. Because he just didn't actually care. He never really liked you in the first place.
I have suspected this for a long time, to be quite honest.
Yeah. So, Chris, I know you're listening, but you now got carte blanche. You can do what you want now. It's all good. Neil's not suspecting a thing.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I mean, this is the thing. The stress of keeping that lie forever to everybody, it would be so immense.
And there's thousands of them.
Yeah.
Like I say, look, I'm a self-employed guy. I've never employed someone. I've never worked with someone. I'm so disgustingly self-centered in that regard, and it's fine. So I don't get this. But my partner, who actually does employ people, who does manage people, tells me when I talk to her about conspiracy theories, how insane it is that anything past maybe 5 people would be to manage. Yes. She's a manager. And it is terrifying to manage something like 12 people that she does at any time, and the 50 that she's indirectly dealing with through other passages of nonsense. Honestly, you just can't do these things.
No, anyone that buys this thing has never put on a gig or a concert or any type of event ever. No public function or anything like that, because they would know how stupid this is to pull off. Let's take the next type. The people who are previously deceased. Right, okay. How the fucking hell are you in that short period of time going to convince a grieving family? No. Don't have the funeral. Don't tell your friends. Don't tell anybody that your daughter's died. Keep that under your hat, because in a couple of months.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, how would you find these people without arising suspicion as well? When he's saying stuff like, Martin Hibbert, he's actually been paralyzed in an operation that's gone wrong. So they've got to find him, hope that he didn't tell any of his family, friends, all the people he works with that he's going for this spinal surgery, right? Okay. And then convince a person whose life is irreparably damaged to go, no, we can make lemonade out of these lemons. If you'll just hide this fact from people for the next however many months, we can use that later. What happens if someone says no? What happens if someone changes their mind? What happens if very, very shortly afterwards, their parents get ill and they can't come back to check on them or whatever? What if you get to Carolina or wherever you've been sent and realize, I don't like it? The other thing is, this was on the news, right? Okay. Oh, this English girl's just arrived in our village in North Carolina. Oh, what was it? That English people dying in that bombing in England. Hang on, that looks bloody like her, doesn't it? There's too many ways that this would fail. It's just ridiculous.
Ariana Grande fans are all around the world, right? All of those people that are super fans would also like,
Yeah.
they're invested in this as well. You know, this became a real thing to like the fandom. So they would have known who like the victims were. Like they would have pictures of them. They did visuals for them all over the world.
Oh, totally. There's a community involved in this.
Yeah. The most silly point that he comes out with is that basically once he's sort of like given like this, either they're dead, they're no ties, or they're apprentice children, he says that even if these people basically did like snap and go, I want to come home or whatever, there's no media outlet that would provide them a platform. And so no one will believe them. Fuck to the off. Right. Okay. Can anybody remember like 2 years ago when the entire alternative media was convinced that some Australian bloke was king because he said so?
Well, was that Stephen Spears or, you know?
It was a bloke called Greg Hallett who just decided that he was king.
Oh, yes. Of the Hutt province. Yep. No, I'm a big fan of this.
Right. So are you telling me if someone appeared on fucking TikTok or whatever and said, yeah, I know I was supposed to be dead from that Manchester bombing, but lo and behold, here I am. He'd go viral. He's then moving on to the injured. The one that he really focuses on is Ruth Morell, and she's the lady that has got a bolt through her thigh, and he says there's no way that she'd be walking like that. So I asked a paramedic that I know, and he said, well, there's several things. One, if it's not shattered her bone, there's really nothing stopping her from walking. And two, the adrenaline that's going through her would be so strong that basically she probably wouldn't feel it until much, much later. And the reason why her blood looks slightly different in the photograph that's taken outside about half an hour later is because it's about half an hour later outside in completely different lighting. There's nothing suspicious, basically. At this point, he brings in Genevieve Lewis. Now, remember I gave you all that stuff about statement analysis. Now, you kind of picked up on that. When they say that it's been looked at by all 50 states, 417 things and blah, 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 that doesn't mean they take it seriously. It just means that somebody's paid for them to go on the course. Now, there were several things that you might have noticed, right? Okay, that basically the methodology to do it involves you getting a baseline, right? It involves you getting a baseline. You write it down and then you see the deviations from the baseline, right? Okay. She never wrote down a baseline. Right? Okay. Furthermore to that, the bloke says that you don't want to know about it because that'll give you confirmation bias. She reveals halfway through the things that she knows that Richard thinks that it was filmed in the morning, and she agrees with him. Also, she doesn't take into account loads of colloquialisms. We'll get to these later and stuff like that. But basically, like, when she came to pick us up, well, she said us, not I. Well, of course she said us. She's from the north. That's how people speak in the north.
Regional dialect.
Yes, yeah.
Like, get us a cup of tea, love. Like, that sort of stuff. It's just the way people speak.
I got a question though. Where is Genevieve from?
No idea. Like, she's English as far as I can tell.
But what's her accent? I thought it was sort of northern, to be honest. I thought she would have kind of got it.
That's a fair point. She evidently didn't. And I've got numerous examples of where she's got it wrong. But anyway.
But we have the same thing when it comes to yous or us, the royal we. We do this all the time. It's a very standard thing to. It's very interchangeable.
This idea that saying we instead of I means that you're lying.
The royal we
is the royal we, exactly. Do you know what? I used to get told off for that. In fact, that's my example of why this is bullshit. Because in job interviews, I'd say we did this and we did this and we did this and we did this, and they said you really should say I. I was like, I mean I. It's the royal we. I wasn't lying. So either I was lying to myself and I didn't know it, or Genevieve Lewis is incorrect about how people use pronoun. But anyway, so statement analysis. Albert Vry, who's one of the leading authorities on detection of deception, points out that most studies on statement analysis never actually establish what the truth is, and thus examiners cannot tell if the subjects were telling the truth or lying. He notes that there is absolutely no standardization in the different methods of analysis. This implies that much depends on the subjective interpretation and skill of the analyst. There is an absence of theoretical underpinning, and it lacks a cohesive set of criteria. And critics argue that the technique encourages investigators to prejudge a suspect as deceptive and presume guilt before the interrogation has even begun. And Genevieve Lewis found that nobody talking about Manchester was telling the truth. It's almost as if she's prejudged it and assumed guilt in everybody. Now, SA has been described as theoretically vague and with little or no empirical evidence in its favour. But don't take my word for it. Skeptics Dictionary and Skeptical Inquiry magazine both did investigations into it and classified it as pointless pseudoscience. Furthermore, in 2016, the High Value Detainee Interrogation Group, which is a federal group consisting of the CIA, FBI, and Department of Defense, released a report saying that studies supporting statement analysis were scientifically flawed and did not withstand any scrutiny in testing scenarios. They said that SCAN is widely employed in spite of a lack of supporting research. When all 12 SCAN criteria were used in a laboratory study, SCAN did not distinguish truth-tellers from liars above the level of pure chance.
Yep, pure chance. That's the fucking P word. Pure chance. That's the one.
Gaps in memory, spontaneous correction have been shown to be indicators of truth, contrary to what statement analysis says. So all these things that they say, being nervous, studying, changing words, studies have shown that in laboratory testing, those actually are indicators of truth, not lying.
Really? Wow.
Now, in the same year, in 2016, 4 scholars produced a study on statement analysis in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. This was Albert Vridge, Ewart Major, Glynis Bogard, and Harold Merkelbach. There have been peer-reviewed studies in 1996, 2012, 2014, and 2015, and all of them showed that statement analysis cannot distinguish between the truth and deception on any level. And the 2016 meta-study showed the same. It said that scientific content analysis has absolutely zero empirical support for the use of statement analysis. Stephen Dreisen, a Northwestern Uni law professor who specializes in wrongful convictions, says that such lie detection tools suffer from an overclaim syndrome. A lot has to do with hubris, a belief on the part of the analyst, police officer, that they know when somebody's lying and that they can tell this with a high degree of accuracy. This plays into a confirmation bias that alters their belief in the results, which is exactly what we've seen. Remember saying on the website that it was 95% accurate. There is absolutely no data to back that up.
Just nonsense.
No, just picked it out. Right, so statement analysis, SCAN or scam by Robert A. Shearer. There are several serious concerns regarding statement analysis from the validity and reliability of SA has never been established. Most of what we know is based on theory and at best erroneous speculation at worst. It is not clear in essay literature what is scientific about the procedure. For example, we do not know the false positive or false negative rates for statement analysis when investigators disbelieve a true statement or believe a false positive statement. Second, much of the literature of essay is vague, imprecise, and ambiguous. Discussions are filled with words like usually, maybe, might, or generally. Quantification is rare, so caution is in order when drawing any conclusions from the literature. Third, the theory of scientific content analysis is supported by broad, sweeping generalizations or universal beliefs. Fourth, the distinctions between written statements for men and women are non-existent in the literature. The proponents of essay would have us believe that there are no gender differences in interpreting statements. Fifth, the interpretation of statements raises the issue of cross-cultural differences in regards to deception. None of the training programs circulating through the law enforcement community qualify techniques in this area of multicultural applications. This would be considered primitive in most professional training organizations. Sixth, considering the claims made by training organizations, very unlikely or extraordinary claims, they should be met with extreme care and skepticism and must be supported by extraordinary evidence. Essay is supported by personal testimony and anecdotes that would hardly be considered extraordinary. In addition, essay makes the mistakes of ignoring or understanding individual differences in people's style of speech, writing, or emotional expression. The mistake is a failure to recognize some truthful people become emotional when suspected of lying. A detection of deception will be frequently mistaken unless they possess a good understanding of the individual's baseline. Finally, it is not clear from the literature whether the judgments of investigators can be contaminated by extraneous information contained in the proportion of the individual stories describing what happened prior to the event, during the event, and after the event. So just to summarize, it's bollocks. It doesn't work. There's no methodology underneath it. It's never been shown to work in any laboratory circumstances. In laboratory tests, it's been proven to not work. And furthermore, even if it did work, Genevieve Lewis is doing it wrong in 3 fundamental ways. 1, she doesn't take a baseline. 2, she doesn't actually take into account any speech patterns from the people before. 3, she doesn't take into account colloquialisms. And 4, she's completely contaminated herself by already believing Richard's stories that it happened at 7 a.m. So I don't wish to be cruel, but the statement analysis, which makes up the majority of the case, is useless. And when you take away the statement analysis and you take away the EXIF data, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing left. And there's very silly things like when she accuses Ruth Morel of lying because she says, my daughter, she's just gone to the theatre, well, but she's come out now. Well, how can she be doing two things at once? My mum's just been on holiday to Jamaica, but she's back now. Am I lying? No, I'm not lying. Right, okay, this is the point. The pronouns thing is nonsense, right, okay?
Oh,
and as we've said, it's just...
Yeah, it's silly as fuck.
But yeah, like, again, so there's other things that she doesn't take into account. Like when Ruth Morel was trying to explain things to the Queen. She's talking to the Queen on live television about her friend who died. Like, and
have you not shut your pants before?
Exactly. This is the thing. It's like,
come on,
it
really,
it's ridiculous.
Seriously,
yeah, totally.
Look, honestly, I'll be surprised if I didn't call myself a cucumber in a situation like that. That's insane. I've talked to a room of 30 people and I've shaken my hands.
Yeah, but you do. This is what happens. Like, people get nervous and say silly things. But when she said, like, I had one of those wounds. Oh, well, does she still not have it? Maybe she only had it in the evening and not the morning. Genevieve Lewis has done herself there because she said that she agrees with Richard's theory. And what was it that they said? The possibility of contamination by extraneous information becomes a great threat to the validity of the technique. That's the person who designed the technique, not the critics of the technique. That's the person that's designed the technique. And she's exhibited a perfect example of doing that. So essentially, she talks a lot of shit. She talks about pronouns always being reliable and stuff like that, which they just aren't. And we'll come on to the memory thing in a bit, in a second. But basically, like, there's even courses I found. I was looking at it. There's even courses how to use correct pronouns when doing public speaking. Why would they exist if they were intrinsic?
There you go.
Yeah. If you just knew them. Yeah. So she might be an idiot.
Yeah.
And that concludes part 6. Thank you for listening to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy, the Manchester Arena bombing on trial series. Tune in next week for part 7. And as always, if you subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/somedarecallitconspiracy, you can listen to the full 8-part series right now. Thanks again.